Hey everyone, welcome back to another Koji Weekly Update video. It is the 13th of October, and it has been a pretty cool week around here this past week. Got a lot of exciting things to share with you. The first one is, if you remember from last week, we got the Array VCC type, which let you take any of the base VCC types and define them as an array, so you could, easily make lists or collections of images or things like that. Taking a suggestion from the community and building off of that, we got the Object VCC type, which lets you define any set of VCCs and basically create a single VCC out of them. So this is a Object VCC that's been defined called Weapon, and this is a weapon for this Koji Arena game. The weapon has a name, it's got a sprite, it's got a projectile, it's got some settings, and it's got the sound that gets played when it's shot. So in the code here, you'll notice that all that's required to do this is to define a VCC with type object and say that the object is a type called weapon. And you define that here by basically creating another object that encloses an additional set of VCC keys. So you'll see that up here, the weapon actually returns an array of objects, and these objects are of type weapon. So that's really cool for building more complex things and kind of better associating multiple VCCs with some kind of higher order structure that is a lot easier to reason about. And going off of that, we've got something even cooler, which is fully custom VCCs. Like you'll notice this weapon VCC is really cool for what it is, but you can imagine more complex data structures being more difficult to reason about and manipulate in this format. This could easily get giant, and you could have sort of, nested objects of nested objects going down 1,000 levels, and no one would be able to deal with it. So custom VCCs basically let you do anything. They're kind of, you can think of them like plugins or extensions into the Koji editor itself. Behind the scenes, these are just iframes that implement the Koji custom VCC post message protocol, which I'll talk about in a little bit. They basically just take in the current value, render it, and then let you manipulate it however you want to manipulate it, and then pass up some kind of new value once something's been changed. So like this example down here is basically a map that I can toggle, and you'll see on the right that as I'm clicking these squares, the value of the array that's enclosed in this VCC is updating. So like, without this would be a total pain to do using like a bunch of booleans or selects or something like that. But because I can just use this custom VCC type, I can make any sort of map that my game or my app or my genre of games or apps requires. This one up here, this other sample, is basically just like a character card, and it's got a name, an image, and a description, which you could do using the normal VCCs, but this allows you to style it with custom styling, represent things in different ways. It really removes any sort of intrinsic restrictions to what you can do with VCCs and what you can do with the no-code side of the Koji editor. So you could imagine if you wanted to make a game like Hearthstone or something like that, you could define a bunch of cards and render them with cool styles and make it a lot more fun for someone who's remixing it to actually go in and customize these relevant things than just like a boring, unopinionated grid of input controls. These VCCs also have callbacks to some native functionality within the editor. So like I just clicked on the cat image and I got the Koji native image select tool, so you can make a callback up for that, for the 3D object modal and the audio modal. More stuff to come there. In the code, these are basically just of type and then the namespace of the custom VCC. So this one is character test or map test. These are just those two that I created. So the other kind of crazy cool thing about these custom VCCs is that they are just Koji apps. So this map VCC that we were playing with, this tile clicker thing, is just a Koji app that is published and marked as a VCC, and then I can use it inside of other Koji apps. So we've basically got Koji apps that can be embedded inside of other Koji apps to make more Koji apps, which is like kind of really odd, but also like exceptionally powerful, because it means that this VCC, this custom VCC, can also be remixed. So like I can see it over here, I can discover these things the same way I discover a normal app. You'll see it's got this banner that explains that it's a VCC, and it might not make much sense in this view. And I can go ahead and just remix this VCC, and we're gonna let that happen. And you can see that now I've got this VCC, this custom VCC, is a Koji project. So this is the same map we were looking at inside of the other editor. And if you open it up, you can see this one's a React app. It's just simply a JavaScript app that implements this Koji custom VCC SDK and responds to post message events from the editor. So when I click one of these things, basically this JavaScript app is sending a message to its parent saying, hey, the value changed, and the editor is saying, okay, I got it. This is a JavaScript library that's available as Koji custom VCC SDK. It's reasonably straightforward to implement. Take a look at it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments or in Discord. Basically, you register your VCC and set an intrinsic width and height so it knows how big to make the iframe that it renders in. And then you add some callbacks and propagate events, and you're good to go. These things also take in the theme from the editor. So if someone is on dark mode or light mode, you'll get that, and you'll be able to style the VCC appropriately so you don't blind people in dark mode with some giant bright white VCC. And then all that's required to actually make this work as a custom VCC is to publish it normally, and then go over here into Tools and go to Custom Domains and add a domain and specify this KojiVCCs.com. And then you can pick any subdomain of this, my VCC, and add it, and now you'll be able to use the VCC in any Koji project simply by setting a type of custom and then brackets my VCC. So this subdomain is the namespace of your published custom VCC. So this is really exciting. This opens up a lot of possibilities for what could be done with this. It's kind of a fully featured way to let third-party developers extend the functionality of the Koji editor to facilitate all kinds of different games and apps that we as the core team might not have built VCCs to support. Up until this point, we've basically had kind of the Koji editor, and it facilitates kind of an infinite number of remixes, but there was this finite set of customization controls on the no-code side of the thing. Obviously, you could dive deep into the code and customize anything. There were no constraints there. But what you could do using the visual controls was constrained by the number of visual controls that we explicitly rendered, the text area, image, sound, that kind of stuff. And with the introduction of custom VCCs, that restriction has effectively been removed, and we sort of have an unbounded number of possible customization controls in here. It's sort of a democratization of no-code customization controls, in addition to this democratization of publishing that Koji already provides. And this ability to take these no-code controls that, like, you know, these two examples that I rendered here are like very crude and very simple. You could imagine them getting crazy, crazy complex, especially as people start to build like more virtual worlds or more storyline driven games, or even some like more complex utilities or like rules engines or things like that. You could imagine these custom VCCs getting like crazy complex. And like one of the issues with that sort of in the non-Koji world is that the more complex these controls get, the fewer apps they actually apply to. Like if you've got some hyper specialized control, you know, maybe it only works in like 2 types of apps, but nothing else it doesn't make any sense for, which is why like a lot of these no-code platforms and no-code tools optimize for this lowest common denominator of customization control. But because these custom controls are simply Koji apps, they can get as complex as they need to be to support a use case, and then they can fork and be remixed to support additional use cases. So we don't run up against that constraint in this weird sort of world that we're living in, this strange Koji land. Anyway, I am super excited about this, excited to see what possibilities it opens up. There is now on the site this developer page, which is going to look a lot nicer this week. But you can see down here the custom VCCs tag, which will let you browse all of the custom VCCs in the system. Right now, there are only those 2 that I showed you. And then if you actually look at these, you can scroll down and you can see which apps use them, in addition to any remixes that might have been published using them. So yeah, play around with this. If you have ideas, happy to chat. I'm crazy excited to see what this unlocks. Like, it, you know, might not be obvious now with just these 2 examples, but this is kind of a fundamental opening up of basically the whole other side of this thing, this back end of the editor, making it extensible to third-party developers to create additional functionality, to make it easier to remix things, to allow more complex, higher fidelity, more interesting remixes. This is super exciting. So that's the big update from this week. Other small things that are probably worth mentioning, we now have parallel builds on deployment. So before it would basically build your front end and your back end and then go. Now those builds happen in parallel, so you'll notice tabs if you're viewing the versions log, and deploy time should be a little bit quicker, which is always cool. In addition to that, the loading time for remixes, we did a little caching on the way that image is getting pulled, so that should be a tiny bit faster, like a couple of seconds, but still cool. Koji database also got an upload file method, so if you look at the documentation, you can see that now there's this database.upload file that takes in the path of a file and then an optional file name and MIME type, and it uploads that file into a folder on your project's CDN slice called like /user data, I think. This is useful if your app lets users upload content. So like some of these multiplayer games with character selectors allowing users to upload avatars, or some of these micro utilities that we're starting to see that are allowing people to post pictures or create photo walls or things like that. This gives you an easy way to store that user-generated content in your app. And it returns a KojiCDN.com URL, so you still get all of the cool image acceleration and manipulation via query string parameters that you get for images uploaded via VCCs. Oh, and then other tiny thing, I can now, this was also a community suggestion. So for the array VCC type, I can do array options, and this is where you can optionally specify a minimum and a maximum number of elements. I can also specify a key add item label and say add weapon in this case. And now you'll see that this button says add weapon. Tiny thing, but also cool. Yeah, so lots of big things this week, lots of things to digest and start to play around with. If you have ideas for custom VCCs, try remixing either of those two examples to get a feel for how they work. Try and render them. If you get stuck, message me or message in post in Discord, and we'll see if we can get some of those out, because those are gonna be crazy cool. This week we are at a conference in LA called Vid Summit for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I'm not sure how long next week's update video is going to be. We're going to be pretty busy, but I think this is, these past couple of weeks have been pretty insane in terms of releases. So it might be a good time to take some time and digest some of this and figure out what the next path forward is. As always, if you have any suggestions, comments, issues, anything, feel free to drop a comment or post in Discord or DM me. Always happy to chat about this stuff. Excited to see where this all goes. Yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks.